back to day 2 of Strong Mobile Free. Today is all about connection. So we're really going to make that connection into the body and feel what that is in mobility, especially for those hips, and what it means for strength within your entire body. So let's get started here with a 4-minute warm-up. Okay, so this one isn't going to be the traditional 90-90. We're going to save that one for the end. This one, I actually want your legs to kind of make this little like triangle thing. Okay, so this is called a shin box. So we're going to come in and kind of see what it feels like to almost think of like pigeon pose, where I'm going to tuck my femur or the top of my leg back into my hip joint, and with a flat back, start to lean forward. I should feel a stretch into my hip, and then I'm going to lean back. I should feel a stretch into that back leg, or maybe I sit up and I feel a little bit more into that hip. You don't want it to be compressing and too much tension, but you definitely want it to feel it, okay? Then I'm going to take those legs up one, up the other, and come over to the other side. Again, leg back into my hip. Feel what that feels like with a straight back to lean forward, get that stretch, lean back, get that other stretch into that hip. Use those legs, one leg up, 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 one leg follows over, okay? The other thing that we can do here is no hands to really get more into that active, pressing up, opening, opening, reach forward so that you don't use those hands. Lean in that straight flat back, open those hips, and then coming over. Leaning over. If you want to advance this one more time, you're going to lean over, bend at those hips, and squeeze that bottom. Leaning back, taking it down, and over to the other side. So now we're really getting into like a hip hinge, that activation in those glutes, and then that slow eccentric load onto those glutes as you come down, and then open it back up. Okay, so this is a really great warm-up just to start opening up right around those hips, prepping you for squats, deadlifts, lunges, jumps, anything of that kind of sort. Okay, so doing about 5 to each side, warming it up, just really feeling what it feels like to be active within those hips. Okay, then we're gonna go to a little bit of an active warm-up for those wrists. So wrists bother a lot of people. The problem is that we need to build the core strength, the stability around the shoulder blades, and activate those fingers. As well, we wanna make sure how much range of motion do we actually have in those wrists. So test it. Come from here, bend down, open it up. If it's not pretty flat, it's going to be really hard when you're doing planks, push-ups, anything on your hands. And this is why you could be getting pain. So we're not going to quite do a passive stretch because we're about to work out, but we're going to do an active one. So we're going to place the hands on the floor into as much range as you feel comfortable. So it doesn't have to be really far, just what you feel comfortable with. And then think of utilizing your body and your fingertips. You're going to push up, and then slowly, slowly, slowly coming back into as much extension as you can tolerate for those wrists, and then coming right back up. Nice and slow, 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 and then right back up. So you do about 5 to 10 of these, and this is really gonna support you if you do any handstand training, push-ups, planks, anything on your hands, you get a lot of pain, this is gonna be a great warm-up, okay? And then 5 to 10 of the active pulling up, fingers toward the ceiling, and then pulling it down, getting a little stretch, coming back up. Active pull, 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 pull as much as you can. Think about that push-up and where those hands have to be. Lift, 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 lift. We don't want any tension and pain around those wrists. So in order to learn more about how to actually open up that range of motion within the hips or within the wrists, there's a bit more that you got to do, but this is a good start, okay? All right, now we're getting right into it. So we're gonna go right into that push-up. I'll show you how to modify if you're not quite into push-ups just yet. Squeeze those bums, press through the ground, so shoulder blades away from the spine as I come down as like a flat body. So I'm trying to get my chest to actually come down first, and then I'm gonna reach out, lift my arms straight, bend my elbows, pull my shoulder blades away from my ears, pull the thumbs higher than the ears, squeeze, extend out as much as I can, hands right underneath me, and if I can, with my toes under, I come right to the top. Okay, so that is one. There's a lot more that we could do within that one, but I'll try to go through the instruction at the same time. Okay, now we're going into lateral bounds. So lateral bounds are really about stability. It's not a lot of bend, it's about a land and then a squeeze through my bum and then a push out to the side. So I get my lateral glutes more around my glute med, which helps in stability when I'm walking, when I'm exercising, when I'm doing anything. We want these glute meds to be active and stable around our hips. It's going to help to support the SI area, the hip area, the back area, and the knees, okay? Now, if you're afraid because your knees don't like jumping too much, go smaller. Push and squeeze. Push, catch yourself, and squeeze. So you can always keep moving here. Get that heart rate up and moving because we are moving and strengthening along the way, okay? Now we're going right into plank up downs. So in this high plank here, squeezing, pressing the shoulder blades away from the spine into the ground, and then coming down one arm and then the other. Again, check in. Am I squeezing my glutes? Am I keeping my abs tight? One hand and the other. The thing that I see happening a lot is that the booty gets left behind. No booties left behind here, okay? And no wiggling and wobbling. Now, if you need to, always come down to your knees. Same thing, tuck under, squeeze, and nice and slow, one arm and then the other as you're coming up and coming down. Okay, I'll try not to talk quite as much so that you can go into it. But let me show you a modified one if you're not quite using those hands, okay? So for the first one, you can go straight into a full plank, coming down, reaching out. Again, lift, squeeze, pull the shoulder blades away from the ears, squeezing as much as you can down, extending out, elbows right underneath you, tuck your toes, come into a full plank, and coming back down. So this is a modification. If you really don't like to use those wrists and you want to stay off of those hands, this is a great modification to still get active everywhere around those shoulder blades, those shoulders, and start to stabilize and move everything, okay? Next one is up and going into those lateral bounds again. So the intention here is to keep moving, get that heart rate rising, which you can hear in me. It's definitely happening, okay? And to push, okay? It is not a big bend. We're not squatting here. We're not doing skaters. So don't be afraid to push out to the side. The greater the push, the more it's going to come into the having to stabilize right around those hips and get you activating into those glute meats. Because if I can push out to the side and I think of pushing that knee, pushing that foot off of the ground one way, push, push. If I can think of continuing to do this, then I don't need a big jump and I actually help to start feeling like, oh, I'm working some things around that lateral outside of my glute, okay? And then back into the plank up downs. So I showed you the modification. If you're not using those wrists again, instead of going up and down, what you can do is just start reaching out and back, reaching out and back. Because what's good about this is that it's still going to want you to move those hips and then come back out. And so the goal is to not move and rotate, it's to squeeze. Check in. Am I squeezing my bum? Am I reaching? Modification for this would be onto the knees. Can I reach and tap without moving, without dropping, and without feeling too much tension into the back? If you start to feel a lot of tension into the back, that's when you know, oh, I'm probably not moving as efficiently, as effectively as I can. Let's drop the ego when we're thinking about strengthening. We want to think of more efficient ways to go into your body rather than causing pain. So go slow. Maybe you only do a couple reps. Maybe you can do more rounds. So we only do 3 rounds of these, remember? And we're only doing 45 seconds or 40 seconds. We're not even doing 45. So you can do 45 seconds. You can do 60 seconds. You can do more rounds and you can mute me so you don't have to hear me talking. Okay, there's so much more that you can do. so that you really start to feel a more effective workout for your own body. But it's more about the stability. So can I stay strong? Can I move slow? Stop thinking about strength of just repping it out, but actually about controlling it out in your body. That's the key here. Control, okay? And balance is so key. How often are we doing single leg movements? How often are you working that into your workout routine? It's important because every single step I take, I am going into a single leg stability. So having that support and squeezing and understanding how to get into that is so important within the body, okay? Whew. Sometimes I need to shut my own mouth, but just trying to give you guys as much value here as I can as we move through these next 5 days together. Whew. Okay, last one. The full plank up downs I'm going to show, but again, you can go back to the modified versions as often as needed. Okay, so many things to think about here. Now, the further apart the feet are, the easier it's going to be. The closer the feet are, the harder it's going to be to maintain that stability. I like to alternate arms, coming down and up with the left, down and up with the right. Okay, alternating so that I'm not keeping it only on one side and I'm switching it up. Noticing, does one arm feel heavier than the other to press up? Does it feel like my hips want to rotate more when I press one way more than the other? And continuing to check in. Can I feel my abs, rib cage down? Can I feel my glutes squeezing? Glutes are usually the number one thing to go when we're exercising in planks or doing upper body work. We forget about the core and the glutes. They need to be working. Okay, so going into now the 90-90. And the reason I love the 90-90 because it really promotes that good rotation through the hip rather than just rotation through the knee. Okay, remember the knee does have a little bit of rotation, and when we're limited in the hip, usually the knee ends up taking the brunt of it. So if we're talking anything like hero's pose, where we're coming here and going down to the floor, you might get it a little bit in the hip. If you're limited in the hip, the knee is what's going to feel, or is what's going to rotate. Same with lotus or pigeon. If we're forcing it into a position that your body's not used to, the knee is going to compensate. This actually helps to throw that out of the picture by putting your knees at 90 degrees, okay? So it's not back, it's not out, it's 90 degrees in the front, 90 degrees between the legs, and 90 degrees in the back leg. We're thinking again, taking that knee, pressing it through that hip, leaning up and over until you feel a stretch. For some people, this might feel really easy. The goal is not to be here. I know it's really easy to want to relax here, but that is not the goal. The goal is to stay up nice and tight, or the goal is to stay up nice and tall, is to push this knee back out through the bottom, push, 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 and actually try to make it more of into that hip joint rather than into the back. So when we round and we flatten, even though it might be easier, we actually end up rounding through the back more than stretching into the hip, okay? And then we can come back. So you would want to hold this for about 1 to 2 minutes. This is a passive stretch we're doing. There are always ways to activate it, to make it more active, to create that longer carryover. But right now, for time's sake, this is what we're doing. If you want to learn more, you can get into the mobility flows in the optimal body. Okay, so here I'm just coming back. I'm putting my hip down toward the ground. And there is a muscle here called the TFL, tensor fasciae latae. I like to call it my coffee muscle. But it gets really tight and crampy when we're doing hip internal rotation stretches. So sometimes just putting a little love and pressure into it will help to relax the hip. You can always use your hands too. And then we'll come to the other side. Okay, so again, same thing. Am I putting my hip back, thinking knee through the hip joint, keeping that back flat and breathing. Most important thing here is to come back to that day one breath. Slow inhale through that rib cage, slow exhale. If we want to increase passive mobility, it's allowing the nervous system to relax, and so that it can get into that passive mobility, okay? It's really so important here. And holding it for about 2 minutes in a passive stretch really allows that body to actually calm down and become more effective, okay? And then again, Coming into that hip internal rotation, can I find, so tensor fasciae latae, that TFL is gonna be, find the hip bone here, come out and down just a little bit, and you find like a little squishy guy here. Okay, so that tensor fasciae latae, just nice and gentle rubbing, nothing painful, nothing pushing. And as you're starting to sit up and push into that hip more, just get it to relax. Give it some love, tell it it's okay, and breathing here. Okay, so these stretches I absolutely love when we can open up our access point. Remember, we talked about this in day one. When we can open up from our access point, which are our hips, then we can start to relieve tension and pressure off of the back, off of the knees. And those are the two main places that I usually hear of complaints the most, is the knees and the low back. So let's take tension off of those areas. Let's increase the rotation in those hips and start doing this on a daily basis. Thank you for joining me on another day of Strong Mobile Free, and I'll see you back here again for day 3.